Vanitas was a depressed, lonely kid who was experimented on every day by a mad scientist, but receives power from the strongest vampire and saves all the vampires from extinction. His parents were killed by vampires right after he was born, so he ended up in the lab. The scientist, Moreau, was a failure who enjoyed experimenting on humans and vampires. He wanted to use the power of the Blue Moon Vampires book, which contains strong magic. Blue Moon vampires are the most powerful vampires, and Moreau somehow managed to make 2 copies of their power, but only members of the Blue Moon clan could use this power, so he experimented on Vanitas and another kid to turn them into members of the clan. One day, Moreau forces Vanitas and the other kid into a risky experiment, warning them that they might die. As he activates the machine, the building starts collapsing. In the chaos, the Blue Moon vampire appears, killing everyone and ready to leave, thinking humans are insane. The other kid begs her to take them with her because they have nowhere else to go. She agrees, feeling sorry for them. Vanitas hates vampires, so he is hesitant at first, but he gets forced by the other kid to go along. The 3 of them become like a family, even with a vampire among them. They eat and have fun like a human family. But the vampire realizes the experiments have shortened the kids' lives, which means they can only live for 2 more years. The only way to save them is to make them part of her Blue Moon clan. The other kid agrees quickly, and although Vanitas resists at first, he eventually agrees too, marked by a blue symbol. In the present, a black man is having tea with a lady on a large airship. As he tries to raise her up, she suddenly gets onto her knees and her eyes turn red as the lights break. Realizing she's a vampire, the man is startled just as adult Vanitas flies in to attack her. The man defends her, and Vanitas threatens him, telling him to drop the woman or die. The man refuses, and they fight. Vanitas uses a sword, but the man dodges and counters, revealing his own vampire nature with red eyes. The man escapes with the woman, who then falls into a trance, overtaken by a dark force. She loses control and attacks everyone around her, including humans. As she is about to kill the man, Vanitas intervenes, using his book's power to save him. Vanitas, who calls himself a doctor with Blue Moon vampire power, aims to save vampires. He realizes the woman's true name is corrupted by the dark force and uses his book to restore it, turning her back to normal. Vanitas gets caught by the guards, so he falls down but is saved by the man. The man introduces himself as No and finds Vanitas interesting for having Blue Moon power. Despite most vampires fearing this power, No thinks Vanitas is cool. Vanitas reintroduces himself as a doctor dedicated to saving vampires and invites No to join him as his partner. No declines, not liking Vanitas' attitude. No wakes up confused, finding himself behind bars with Vanitas. Vanitas explains that No was poisoned and has been sleeping for 10 hours. Vanitas stayed with him because he considers them partners, though he lost his book during the chaos. Despite their situation, Vanitas remains determined, believing they can handle any challenge together. The security informs them that they are invited by Count Orlok. No is shocked and asks Vanitas why they were freed. Vanitas thinks the humans and the vampires probably reached an agreement and let them go. Once outside, No is filled with joy and excitement, as he rarely leaves his home like most of us. Vanitas and No spend quality time together in France until they finally arrive at the place to meet the Count. After the war with humankind, vampires were forbidden to harm humans. Since then, most vampires have either vanished or lived among humans. Orlok is the vampire appointed by the Queen in France to maintain peace between humans and vampires. When they arrive, they are violently welcomed by 2 vampires, but Orlok orders them to leave. Vanitas gets straight to business and asks Orlok where his book and the woman from the airship are. Orlok tells them that the woman is captured and he will eliminate her himself because she is cursed. No gets mad and tells him that Vanitas cured her with his book, but Orlok refuses to believe in the book's power and Vanitas. Vanitas laughs and says that Orlok is too dumb to know how to use the book and its power. Vanitas just wants to save the vampires from annihilation, but the 2 maids refuse to be saved by a human. As they argue, No has a flashback, revealing that he lost someone precious to him because of this curse. He destroys the table and steals the book, offering a deal to capture the curse bearer causing trouble in Paris. Orlok agrees and gives them 1 day to bring the vampire to him. As they think about their next move, They are greeted by Dante, a half-vampire whom Vanitas calls an information peddler who will do anything for money. Dante provides information about the cursed vampire killing people in Paris and gives them a bat to follow to his comrade tailing the killer. No immediately carries Vanitas and dashes off. They spot an explosion nearby, revealing the vampire they are looking for. The vampire is trying to kill another victim. No throws Vanitas as a distraction, and he drops the vampire. Vanitas uses his book, and blue power flows into him, turning the vampire back to normal, at least for now. As they consider tying up the vampire to bring him to Orlok, a little kid appears with a woman, both vampires who want to destroy the book. When Vanitas asks why, the woman gets mad, and the kid says the book is responsible for cursing vampires' names. Vanitas finds him foolish for thinking he is using the book to curse and destroy vampires. The kid wants to punish Vanitas and destroy the book because his crush is also cursed. Vanitas offers to save the kid's crush instead. Suddenly, the woman attacks, and No quickly gets Vanitas out of harm's way. Vanitas removes the woman's mask and realizes she is Jean, known as the Hellfire Witch, who killed 1,000 vampires that sided with humans long ago. Jean, commanded by the kid, attacks them to take the book. She reveals a dark red weapon used to kill those 1,000 vampires. She chases them, nearly hitting No with her weapon, but No throws Vanitas to a safe place and Jean shoots a huge pink flame at No. Luckily, they both manage to get away. No can't believe that no one wants to talk and listen, but Vanitas thinks it's fair because the book can corrupt and restore someone's name, making every vampire fear its power. However, No believes it's foolish to think that way, as he saw Vanitas use it to save the woman. Vanitas laughs and says he has a plan to deal with the Hellfire Witch if they work together. Vanitas and Jean face each other, with Vanitas provoking her by saying she has fallen so low to be commanded by a little kid when she is supposed to be the strongest. He says he's had enough, drops the book, and introduces himself as Vanitas, who has the power of the Blue Moon Vampire. Even though he is human, he pretends he didn't want to use his true form to scare her. Suddenly, the cursed vampire attacks Jean from behind, and Vanitas picks up his book and smashes her. The half-vampires watching from above are shocked and think Vanitas is a jerk for hitting a girl. Jean can't move after the attack, but watches as Vanitas uses his book to successfully turn the cursed vampire back to normal. Vanitas realizes he messed up because he was supposed to cure the vampire in front of Orlok. However, the two maids who were watching decide to inform Orlok about how Vanitas cured the vampire. Jean gets up, saying she can still fight, but Vanitas calls No, who arrives holding the kid hostage. Vanitas corners Jean and threatens her to not make a single false move. Jean accepts her loss and begs Vanitas not to hurt her master, offering herself instead. Vanitas laughs, saying he likes her even though she has gotten weaker. He brushes her hair and kisses her deeply. Vanitas then declares he has fallen for her and will love her for the rest of his life. The Kid Master is furious, but Jean stops him, saying she will return to kill Vanitas next time. Vanitas is happy she will come back for him. Elsewhere, the cured vampire dies, turning to ashes, and a creature named Charlatan leaves, expressing the trouble it went through to claim his name. The next day, Orlok releases the woman under the condition that she works as a maid for him. He also warns Vanitas to stay under his watch and be used to cure more vampires. Vanitas gets serious and asks Amelia if she saw Charlatan before losing control. She recalls seeing a fog and a parade of Charlatan before losing control, though her memory is hazy. Orlok then asks No if he can help, as No comes from a family with the special power to search through memories by sucking blood. Hesitant at first, Amelia assures him, and No starts sucking her blood, entering her memory. He sees Amelia in a fog with clowns and creatures dancing and singing. She encounters a strange being that welcomes her to the Charlatan parade. She runs away but is caught by a long-necked creature that eats her head, stealing her true name. No screams and breathes heavily, realizing Charlatan corrupted her name and vowing to kill it. A girl named Domi shows up, laughing and calling No her fiancé. No introduces her as his childhood friend. Domi quickly puts a collar on No and takes him away, not wanting him with Vanitas. She takes him to a barrier connecting the human and vampire worlds, where only vampires can enter. She tells him he will learn more about Charlatan there. Vanitas follows them, and it turns out a human can enter the vampire world if holding a vampire. Domi tells No to go outside and questions Vanitas about following them. Vanitas explains he knew she wanted to separate No from him. They finally step outside to Altus Paris, the vampire world. Domi then takes them to her shelter, where she brings No inside while Vanitas stays outside waiting. She immediately starts teasing No, but since he's a loser, he starts apologizing for bringing Vanitas with him. Domi doesn't care and walks up to him, unchaining him before undressing just a little and allowing No to suck her blood. No digs in without hesitation. A while later, they are all dressed up and enter a huge mansion filled with people wearing weird clown masks, dancing all around the massive room. No starts getting uncomfortable because he's an introvert, unlike Vanitas, who is the opposite and tries his luck with the kids. No immediately carries him away because that's just weird. They follow Domi around, but No gets distracted by some robot-looking things and follows them, leaving Domi and Vanitas alone. Just then, No runs into the same kid from earlier, now with two guards addressing him as Master Luca. The guards ask Luca if this black guy is bothering him, but Luca says it's his slave, saving No from getting into trouble. Domi decides to take advantage of No's absence and takes Vanitas into a dark room, tying him to the wall before throwing knives at his head. Vanitas thinks she's doing this because she likes him, but Domi walks up to him and slashes him across the face, asking why he is trying to take advantage of No. She keeps throwing knives at him, questioning what a human like him can do to save vampires. Vanitas finally breaks free of the chains and tells her that he will prove he has the power to do so right now. After saying that, he jumps off the balcony and lands on a light, shouting at all the vampires to look at him. He claims he has the power of a blue moon vampire. Everyone is scared and doesn't believe him, but Vanitas shows the blue mark on his hand as proof of being part of the Blue Moon clan. The vampires immediately get worried, and some even prepare to kill him, but he gets his book out and tells them he has the power to corrupt every vampire's name in the room, but he won't do it. Instead, they are lucky because he will use it to save them as he is a doctor. However, the speech doesn't go as planned as the leader of these vampires, named Veronica, shows up and immediately decides to kill Vanitas. Thankfully for him, Jean comes in clutch and carries Vanitas out of there to a roof, saving his life. Vanitas is completely stunned by her, but she drops him and tells him to get out already. She suddenly starts acting weird while a loud whistling noise is heard in the mansion. No one has any idea what's going on when suddenly a bunch of cursed vampires show up and start attacking everyone in the room. No takes Luca and runs away until they finally run into Luca's two guards, but they get slaughtered by a creature in front of them. One of them attacks Luca, but No blocks the attack and throws him away. The other immediately attacks, but No sidesteps, shatters his sword completely, and slams him into the wall. The creature decides to use relentless combo attacks, but No is way too good and dodges all of it before kicking him away. No asks who the hell they are when suddenly Charlatan emerges from one of the creatures. Meanwhile, Vanitas realizes Jean is very weak and offers to let her drink his blood. She tells him that he might die because of this, but he doesn't care if he dies because of a cute girl like her. She is hesitant but realizes she needs the strength to save her master Luca, so she pounces on Vanitas and starts sucking his blood. Charlatan starts laughing while No gets mad at it for cursing vampires. He dashes towards them, kicks one of them, and tries punching Charlatan but fails. This ugly creature reminds No of his past when he lost his friend to the curse, causing No to start crying. Charlatan takes advantage of this and tries to brainwash him by promising to bring his friend back. No nearly gives in, and as it is about to consume him, Vanitas suddenly appears behind Charlatan and pushes it away. Charlatan, confused, asks who Vanitas is, but then the other one dashes towards Luca. Suddenly, Jean spawns in and destroys it with her red weapon. Charlatan then makes a noise that summons curse bearers, and they run away thinking they aren't worth their time. Jean gets rid of the curse bearers in an instant and takes Luca with her, following Charlatan. Domi then comes running to No, and he falls into her arms, exhausted. But Domi slaps him and tells him to get a grip because there are still curse bearers left in the hall. Vanitas then explains that he is the only one who can save them. Although Domi doubts him at first, she pulls out her sword and decides to protect him. As they head out, they find their first patient, and No jumps in while Vanitas turns the vampire back to normal. However, they find themselves surrounded by vampires who accuse Vanitas of cursing them. They try to kill Vanitas, but No kicks them down. Domi then comes up and says there's one more curse bearer left, and they rush to that vampire. Veronica shows up out of nowhere and asks Domi why she's protecting a human. Meanwhile, they see that it's the girl from earlier who has lost control and is eating her own family. When they get there, Vanitas says it's too late for her because she has completely turned into a monster. She asks Vanitas to kill her before she slaughters her own little sister too. No insists Vanitas not to do it, but he tosses No aside and approaches the vampire, getting his book out to turn her completely into ashes. No walks up to him, mad, and questions why he killed her. Vanitas answers that he doesn't care what the vampires think. He will save the vampires in his own way, and he just saved the little vampire now by turning her into ashes as that was her wish. No doesn't understand if killing is considered saving. At that moment, Veronica appears, using her ice magic to fill up the room, and they jump off the balcony trying to run away. She thinks Vanitas stinks and doesn't like the smell of humans. Veronica uses her magic to throw multiple ice attacks and catches Vanitas with her ice. She begins to freeze his body, and No can't even run to save him because he is so weak. The ice keeps spreading, nearly reaching Vanitas' head, as she can't stop laughing until suddenly the ice stops, and her mask gets broken by a big guy whom Veronica calls Lord Ruthven. He tells her not to behave like this as it will ruin their reputation, but she explains that Vanitas is part of the Blue Moon clan and bears the clan's mark on his arms. She believes he used the book to spread the curse on the vampires. Ruthven reaches Vanitas in an instant and asks if he was the one who turned the girl into ashes earlier. Vanitas smiles and admits that it was him. Ruthven gets furious and burns with fire, but No steps up and tells him to stop whoever he is as No was in the middle of talking with Vanitas. He tells him not to jump to conclusions when they don't know what's happening. He says he will not let them blame Vanitas. Ruthven surprisingly laughs and apologizes for his manners, introducing himself as someone who serves the queen of the vampires. As No falls onto him, Ruthven uses his magic to melt the entire ice in the room. No then passes out and wakes up, finding himself in a weird room. He gets up and opens the windows until he sees Vanitas all alone on a roof, so he approaches him, asking what happened after he passed out. Vanitas says that nothing really happened. Ruthven just dismissed the crowd and told them that they were his guests. The room No was sleeping in was also one of Ruthven's. No then sits down and asks Vanitas why he is mad and why he killed the girl earlier. Vanitas gets mad and draws his sword, but No blocks it. Vanitas says that he doesn't like Noah's attitude because he's a softie and wants him to go away. But No says that he doesn't have to follow his orders because he isn't his servant, and he also doesn't like him when he says he wants to save vampires. However, he finds Vanitas interesting, so he's staying with him out of his own will. Even if Vanitas doesn't want him to, he will stay by his side to find out what Vanitas' actions will lead to. Vanitas then laughs and tells him to do whatever he wants as he couldn't care less. No also apologizes to him at the end. Vanitas and No go to meet Ruthven in his office, where he informs them that the charlatan are most likely after Luca. He tells them that Luca is a close advisor to the queen, and taking her out would immensely help countless nobles carry out their corrupt plans. Vanitas immediately asks Ruthven to take them to the queen, as he believes she is the one giving rise to curse bearers. Vanitas starts badmouthing the queen to provoke Ruthven, and as a result, they get kicked out of the castle along with a threat to never be back again. They head back to Orlok and report the recent happenings. While he is pissed at him, Vanitas simply ignores him as he is busy telling No about how vampires are wired to go blind with rage if the queen is insulted. He adds that Luca was eerily calm during the incident, which raised his red flags that the queen might actually be the one plotting everything. Later that day, Vanitas' informant, Dante, brings in more information to sell. They tell him that the night before, they saw a curse bearer being kidnapped in front of their eyes and got beat up badly when they tried to stop it. They hand him a button that they tore off from the kidnapper's coat during the fight. Vanitas immediately recognizes the symbol as that of the anti-vampire unit of the church. The church has a group called the Chasseurs with enhanced humans who worship God so much that they believe their whole existence is to kill the vampires. They believe that the vampires are God's enemy. That night, Vanitas cannot sleep and sneaks out to investigate the kidnappings. No, being obsessed with him, notices this and joins him right away. Vanitas is picking the lock of the church when two priests hear the noise and come out to check. The boys tie them up and strip them, but since they do not have a lot of time to satisfy their curiosity, They just put the priest's clothes on as a disguise. Vanitas opens a doorway to the underground tunnels and tells No that the anti-vampire unit's HQ has been in the dungeons since the war. As they explore the dungeons, they run into a captain of the unit. They pretend to be innocent, lost priests, and he offers to take them back where they came from, although he has his doubts about them. After walking for a while, the crafty guard tricks Vanitas and locks him up in a cell. Without wasting time, he then throws an anti-vampire flash grenade at No, which messes his vision up and reveals his identity as a vampire. The captain, overcome with bloodthirst to slay his mortal enemy, injects himself with steroids to be able to destroy No completely. Despite having zero vision and feeling sick, No stands up to face the guard. Vanitas tries to convince him to run, and seeing his concern makes No moan his name. As soon as the captain hears Vanitas' name and recognizes him as the human they're looking for who has the book with magic, Vanitas is offended that the captain considers him nothing more than Noah's sidekick and scratches the captain's face. As the captain continues trying to save Vanitas, Noah regains his vision and prepares to take him down. The captain notices this and dashes towards Noah with his double-edged spear with godlike speed. Noah barely manages to dodge him. He then jumps up in the air and strikes down but ends up hitting the ground as Noah jumps backward. Just as he stands back up, the captain takes out his throwing knives and slashes at Noah's arms with a powerful throw. He then morphs his spear into a whip and strikes at Noah with it. Noah grabs onto it to stop it, but the priest then electrocutes him by activating the stored electricity in the whip. As No falls to his knees, the captain dashes at him to whip him again, but Vanitas manages to escape his cell and stops him. As the dust settles, the captain notices that the boys have escaped. Just then, two of his comrades step in, and he tells them what had happened. The trio sets out hunting down the intruders. Vanitas and No are hiding in a corridor deep within the dungeon, where Vanitas admits that he came here looking for someone. He tells No that his target's name is Moreau, whose obsession with vampire research caused him to go mad. This eventually got him expelled from the church. Meanwhile, the captain puts out a public announcement about the intruders as he steps out with his companions to look for them himself. He finds his men lying unconscious on the floor. Their robot guards had all turned against their masters. On the other hand, Vanitas and No are exploring the dungeon further as No wonders how Vanitas knows the way so well. Sensing his confusion, Vanitas tells him to mind his own business because he is just a black vampire, but this pisses No off and starts screaming at Vanitas. This brings a bunch of guards to them, but as soon as they throw a flash bomb, Vanitas uses his book to escape and seal the door behind them. No then comes up with a plan, and the boys step out in the open, pretending that Vanitas is Noah's hostage. The captains are immediately convinced by their acting, and one of them charges at No. The vampire throws his friend into the air to get him out of the way of his fight and jumps up just as the guard slashes down with his axe. He then uses the guard's back to leverage himself to jump higher and launches down a kick to another captain's head. Once the captain is unable to move, No starts trying to reason with him because he finds him too cute to fight with. Eventually, he tells the captain that Moreau is still alive and that his experiments are causing vampires to go crazy. This grabs the captain's attention, and he immediately offers to join them in defeating the crazy scientist. Vanitas leads them to Moreau's bunker, and as soon as they open the door, they are greeted by Moreau revealing to everyone that Vanitas was one of his experiments and is happy to see him after such a long time. Vanitas goes ahead to greet Moreau and introduces the others as his supporters who want to help him with his experiments. Listening to this makes Moreau insanely happy, as he has always been alone in his mission and deprived of any love. He takes them in for tea and tells them that he is researching vampires because he wants to become one someday. He adds that one day, the Blue Moon vampire broke into his lab and took several of his specimens away, including Vanitas, who was the most extraordinary among them. This was a major setback for him, but now that Vanitas is back to help him, he believes that things will be good again. He then goes on to tell them that there is an important person who supports his research. When they ask him the name of this person, he simply switches the topic to how he loves to collect eyeballs of vampires. He then admits that he is fascinated by Vanitas's, and just as the crazy scientist is about to pull them out, No grabs his hand. Vanitas asks him to stop interrupting, but No is so pissed about Moreau wanting to touch Vanitas's balls that he slams him onto the table. Moreau No's bodyguards rush to attack him, but the captain knocks them out. As No holds onto the doctor, Vanitas draws a knife on him and threatens him to reveal the name of the person. But before they can get him to confess, a monster jumps down onto the scene, kicks Vanitas away, and grabs onto Moreau, preparing to escape. No recognizes the monster as the spider monster from the party. They jump onto the balcony and get into the lift, but Vanitas refuses to give up. He pulls out his book, but just as he is about to attack, Moreau triggers his PTSD with memories of his past. As No tries to help him get his act together, a shadow monster jumps into the room out of nowhere and starts causing chaos. It starts eating some of the captain's comrades, and to save them, the captain strikes at the monster's mouth with his lance, but it has no effect. Vanitas tries to get everyone to listen to a plan he has, but he is cut off as the monster shoves him away and knocks him out by crashing him into the wall. He is woken up by the sound of No begging and remembers that there is no time to think about his fantasies. He tells No to get the captain and his fighters out of the room as he deals with the curse bearer inside the monster. No then reveals that he wants to be eaten by the monster, and the idea makes Vanitas get excited as well. He grabs onto his book and runs towards the beast to give it the time of its life. The captain and his army slash at the beast's limbs, and as it falls to the ground, No and Vanitas jump into its mouth. They finally see the curse bearer acting as the core of the beast. Just as they get wrapped up in darkness, Vanitas immediately uses his magic, which turns the beast into a rock and breaks it into pieces. The boys fall out of its belly and onto the ground with a young vampire in their arms. Just as they are celebrating, the ceiling of the lab starts to collapse. Everyone runs out as soon as possible and as far as possible before they stop to catch their breath at a safe place. After they reel from the shock of the lab self-destructing, the captain finally introduces himself as Ron and asks No and Vanitas to leave as this place is not safe for them. He assures them that he will take care of their task to report these incidents to Warlock and pulls them into a tight hug. Just as No and Vanitas run away, another member of Chasseurs walks in. He asks the squad about the commotion, but Ron ignores him and starts hitting on him, which gets the captain slapped. However, this does not faze the captain, and he keeps talking about how he met a harmless vampire. Meanwhile, No and Vanitas escape the dungeons and end up by a riverside in the middle of the city. They are so exhausted that they sit down to rest right away in some dark corner of the city. The next day, Amelia walks into the boy's room and hands him an invitation from Jean that had arrived for him. He immediately starts dressing up, which seems suspicious to No, and he questions where he is going. Vanitas refuses to tell him and simply heads out to meet Jean for the date. Jean starts pretending to be completely interested in him because Domi had told her that Vanitas only loved people who did not love him back. But instead of getting him off her back like she wanted, he seems to gain even more interest in her. As they walk through the town, Domi sneakily follows them around to see if the plan succeeded. She sees them walking hand in hand and cozying up in public and is not surprised at how easily Jean was won over. She hates herself for setting up this date and ruining her own chances with Vanitas. Vanitas takes Jean to explore Paris and feeds her stuffed rolls in a park, which makes her actually start to fall for him. Meanwhile, No is woken up by Ruthan suddenly appearing in the room and is taken out to a cafe by the Lord. The fact that Ruthan booked an entire cafe for their meeting makes No feel special, but Ruthan then keeps talking about Vanitas. No tries to bring Ruthan's focus back on him by telling him that he reminds him of his master. Ruthan reveals that he was indeed a teacher in the past and was loved by his students. The only thing keeping him in check was the authorities, and before his students were old enough, they were all killed. He adds that he would love to have students like No, as it would fill his days with pleasure. Ruthan then goes full force into winning him over by telling him that Vanitas is only taking advantage of him. He asks No if his type is humans or vampires, to which No replies that he likes them both. Ruthan then declares that No has failed the test and suddenly starts struggling with intense pain. Ruthan grabs onto him and bites him in the neck while gagging him with his massive hand to control his moans. Back at the park, the date is interrupted by a boy tripping over while playing. He starts bleeding, which makes Jean lose control and reveals her vampire identity in public. This causes chaos in the park, but before she can attack anyone, Vanitas grabs onto her and makes her bite his hand. Suddenly, they are covered by a smoke screen by Domi and Dante. They waste no time in escaping the scene and head over to Jean's house, where she then starts to drink his blood. Vanitas asks her bluntly if she is a curse bearer who has been forbidden to talk about it by someone. She simply ignores him and takes off his tie before giving him the time of his life. She suddenly starts crying and makes him promise to kill her if she ever causes any harm to Luca. Meanwhile, at the cafe, a dark aura starts taking over No, causing him to collapse to his knees. Ruthen asks him to become his slave and hypnotizes him. Once the ritual is complete, Ruthen makes No his slave by tying a collar around his neck, and No suddenly loses consciousness. Spider, who was hiding at the cafe, comes out and asks his master why he did not kill No as originally planned. Ruthen reveals that he decided to use No as a pawn instead and find out what he will do with Vanitas. Later that night, after Jean calms down, Vanitas walks her back home to seal his deal. She tells him what her original plan was, and he reveals that he knew. He expresses his shock at the fact that Luca let her go on the date. She tells him that Ruthen gave her permission to go on the date, which immediately sets off warning bells in his head. He rushes to their room, but as soon as he enters, he finds someone who seems like No sleeping there. No wakes up and asks him why he looks so worried, but Vanitas just tells him to shut up. Back in the street, Jean is still waiting for Vanitas to come back when Ruthen approaches her. He tells her that he heard reports of a vampire causing chaos in the park and rushed to check in. She begs him to forgive her, explaining that she did take consent before biting the human. He agrees and wraps his coat around her before asking her to come home with him. After a while, Dante jumps into Vanitas' room through the window and informs him that the beast of Gavaudan has risen. Seeing how clueless No is, he tells him that it is a huge wolf with sharp claws and red fur. In the past, it had raided the village of Gavaudan and massacred the residents mercilessly. Dante adds that the beast is believed to be a curse-bearing vampire. While they are not sure if it is the same beast, 5 bodies have already turned up this month, all killed in different ways just like in the past. More importantly, there are eyewitness accounts. Vanitas immediately gets up to go outside to think alone, but before leaving, he asks No about his plan. However, No is busy thinking about how good Vanitas smells and wanting to drink his blood. Unable to focus on the conversation, he decides to convince Vanitas to let him have his blood and starts buttering him up. Vanitas cuts him off and tells him never to ask permission to drink his blood if he wants to live. No is surprised at how mean Vanitas is, but he just ignores him and leaves. No lies down, crying about how he messed up the only chance he had to drink Vanitas' blood. The next day, when Vanitas comes home to get ready for the investigation, No joins him too. As they are walking, Vanitas can no longer take the awkwardness and confronts No about it. No apologizes for the day before, and Vanitas allows him to drink his blood when he is injured. But that is where this video ends. Please subscribe for part 2.